So, Mr. Vice Chair and Cameron, are you expecting everybody except for the chairman?
Derek Hyrup has been joining us late, so that may be. As you can tell, I'll just say for the recording, it's Tim Stevens. I'm filling in for Chair Krasner this evening, who will return at our next meeting. So I'll do my best to keep up with his excellent meeting skills, but I'll apologize in advance for any faux pas. So with that, Mr. Gayers, perhaps you could get us started by reading the notice.
Sure thing. Stevens, as always, this meeting for which this agenda has been posted will be held pursuant to and in compliance with the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, Section 2.2-3708.2, and state and local legislation adopted to allow for continued government operation during the COVID-19 declared emergency. All participating members of the Planning Commission will be present at this meeting through electronic means, and all members of the public are welcome to view the meeting at fallschurchva.gov/PC and on FCC TV, Cox 11, RCN 2, Verizon 35. Public comments will be accepted virtually. Those who sign up will speak via the meeting video platform. To speak on public hearing item or provide general public comment, complete a speaker form at fallschurchva.gov/public comment before noon on the day of the meeting. Following submission of the form, you will receive email instructions to join the virtual Planning Commission meeting. Written public comments will be accepted at plan@fallschurchva.gov until the end of the meeting and will be sent to the Planning Commission and summarized at the meeting.
Thank you. Would you like to call us to order, please, with a roll call?
Yes. Mr. Stevens?
I'm here.
Ms. Comat?
Here.
Mr. Puentes?
Here.
Ms. Teets?
Here.
Ms. Weiss?
Here.
I'm sorry, how am I listed in front of me? And we're missing
Derek Hyrup.
Mr. Krasner. Mr. Krasner, sorry. Commissioner Krasner.
Okay, so he is absent. Did we get everybody? Except for Mr. Hyrup, who will probably be joining us later. Okay, so we can move ahead with the agenda. It's fairly straightforward this evening. We're going to review the capital improvements program. We do have another action item regarding a proposed letter of endorsement, which we'll cover a little bit later. And then we also have some information items. So with that, would anyone like to make a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
And that was Ms. Weiss, I believe, on the second. Okay, all those in favor of? Or would you like to take the roll call to do that, please?
Mr. Stevens,
Yes.
Ms. Weiss,
Yes.
Ms. Carmont,
Yes.
Ms. Teets,
Yes.
Mr. Fuentes,
Yes.
Mr. Hyra, and Mr. Krasner.
All right, thank you. We have an agenda. So we don't have a speaker series this evening, and I will ask you, Mr. Garris, again, do we have any petitions for items not on the agenda?
No, we do not.
Do not. Okay, so we can move right ahead into our capital improvements program discussion. I'll start out by just pointing out that Ms. Mester presented her overview summary of this year's CIP at our last. So we held questions at that time so that we have time this evening for commissioners to ask questions and make comments. Our goal is to send our recommendation to City Council via our motion, which we can develop later in the meeting after we have a chance to talk through some specifics. I'm always impressed with the great amount of detail that's involved in constructing the CIP, both the individual projects, the source of funding, staff resources, and so forth. A lot of moving parts. So we appreciate all the effort to pull this all together. This is a so-called odd numbered year with the 2023 through 2028, which means that by convention, we limit the number of new projects in deference to staff's ability to implement projects already in the queue. So with that, one thing I'm going to do now is to see if we have any public comments. That's part of the public hearing aspect of our adoption process. And I'll also ask again, or I'll provide another opportunity for any public comments right before we adopt our motion of recommendation. But for right now, Mr. Garris, do we have any public comments?
No public comments were received.
None. Okay. All right. So I'll also add to members of the public, if anybody's watching, that you also have the ability to send comments directly to members of City Council, who will actually take the vote on adoption of the CIP in a few weeks. So with that, why don't we go ahead and open up the floor to commissioner questions and comments. I have some, but following Chair Krasner's lead, I will hold off on mine till last. So would anyone like to start out by asking questions or making comments on this year's proposed CIP? I see a hand there, Cindy Mester.
Thank you, Vice Chair Stevens and Commissioners. I thought if I could, if you didn't mind, Mr. Stevens, I'd like to provide an overview on just a couple things, because I actually have 3 changes to the CIP, which is good news, but it happened after the budget process. So I'd like to update you all on that, and then just highlight the new attachments that you have. And then, because the work session before the public hearing, then we'll go back to all your good comments and questions, if that's acceptable.
Please do. Please go
All
ahead.
right, great. So Cameron, if you wouldn't mind bringing up the revised staff report, I think that'll be a good tool to work from, and up at the motion level, page 1. Great, thank you. So one, just to note, per the norm, I have given you a template for the motion, and you can see at the end there's places for you all to add and modify, and of course any of it can be modified. The section in gray is brand new, so that's the part I thought I would, from the staff report that you'd seen, just use that to highlight the changes to the CIP. And these are literally sort of breaking news after we had already posted the package and you had the full CIP documents. Number 1, we got great news from Congressman Beyer that with the latest federal budget that was just appropriated, which included community request, community requests used to be fondly referred to as earmarks, and then they disappeared for a long time. They're back now in this current federal environment, but each representative has a certain number of submissions they could do. So Congressman Byer actually submitted 2 on behalf of the city out of his 16. So we got both of them for just at 800,000 out of his 5.4 million. So I think the city did great. One of them is for the school system, and that is for another EV bus and charging system infrastructure to go with the 2 that they have from the Dominion grant. So that's great news, but it won't be in the CIP. That'll be part of the school's operating budget, but I want to give credit for that acknowledgement. The other is 400,000 that you can see under modifications number 1, which was put in for stormwater funding, specifically for Lincoln stormwater. And that'll be in the FY23 stormwater project, and I've listed the page there. So if it's acceptable to the Planning Commission tonight, I will be asking you all to approve all of these modifications, because then when it goes to the city manager and then to council, it's one consolidated recommendation and motion. If there's not enough information and you don't want to take these modifications forward, then I will have to just add them to the city manager's proposed budget so they become part of the discussion. So you'd have the Planning Commission motion and then a slightly different one from the city manager. If acceptable tonight, we can merge them and have one consistent motion. The second item is the Capital Area Food Bank. I mentioned this in the presentation last time. We've subsequently determined, based on governmental accounting, that this needs to be moved to the operating budget instead of the CIP, because we'll just be doing a contribution to the construction. So it's still funded, still using ARPA, just changing where it's accounted for. And the third item is a total increase of 400,000, actually using ARPA money as well, to provide some additional support and facility reinvestment for the property yard. One is a vehicle lift, the heavy lift that picks up the trucks and vehicles for repairs and maintenance. And it has, since we started this process, became really unsafe and more end of life than anticipated. It won't survive. So we've worked to fund that and add that, and also include some bay door work. And then the other is to do a facility needs assessment, and this will help us with future redevelopment of that area. And we have some significant aging, HVAC, and other issues of the building, so this will allow us to get ahead of that. So I just wanted to acknowledge those 3 changes that were not in the CIP that you received. And certainly as we go through the questions this evening, open to questions, but I would ask that you would include that in your motion this evening. And then, Cameron, if you don't mind bringing up attachment 6-1. I'm not going to go through this in detail. I just wanted to highlight for the commission that the comprehensive area plan report card and the small area plan report card, the SAP one is currently on the screen. Those were 2 attachments that we didn't have ready on March 2nd. So they were updated with a team of staff and then was in your packet last week. So this is the, so I think we're on the 3rd cycle we missed last year of updates to these report cards, which were a request of the Planning Commission, so that we could really track how did the CIP tie back to the comp plan, especially those new chapters that have been updated with specific strategies and actions, and then also for the area plans. So a lot of pages and a lot of details, but it's another way to see that while sometimes our CIP projects seem to take a long time because of federal funding and design and advertising and all that good stuff, we actually have, as I noted with the SNAP, a lot of good progress being made even as we go through the COVID period. So I wanted to highlight those 2. And then, Chair, attachment 7 are the questions that were yours that you submitted. So I'm glad to do them now or hear from other commissioners and come back to that attachment.
Yeah, I think I'll give the other commissioners a chance to weigh in with their thoughts before I try to address that. And I really don't plan to go through all of those, however many questions I had.
Yeah.
So,
I will just note that those questions were posted this afternoon, thanks to Cameron's assistance, so they are available for you all and the public. And the last thing, if I could, Mr. Stevens, just acknowledge I do have some of the CIP team with me this evening. It's, of course, a very robust and big group, but I didn't bring them all to an evening meeting. But I do want to acknowledge and thank that we do have Kristen Michael, Carrie Odenino, let's see, Tony Dudley, and Ali Kavari here, so that if there's any specific project questions that might be a deeper dive in a certain subject area, they're here to assist us in responding to your questions. So thank you for those few moments.
Sure. Glad to see the staff members join in, and also want to acknowledge Councilmember Duncan as well, who's joined us. So also feel welcome to make comments as appropriate. Okay, why don't we open the floor up to our commissioners and see who has questions and or comments. I'll try my best to identify hands being held up to call on you. Okay, I think I see Commissioner Comont. The floor is yours.
Sure, I can go first. First of all, thanks, Ms. Mester, and to your staff. I know this is a huge effort to gather all of this information and, answer all of our many questions. I want to particularly thank you for answering some of the questions that I emailed to staff in January as part of the staff report. I really appreciated you taking the time to go through each and every one of those. That was really, really terrific. And a lot of good information. I do have one quick question on the new information that you provided tonight, the $400,000, the federal stormwater funding for Lincoln. I was just curious, how was the Lincoln project in particular selected for that funding?
That was at the time where we had a shortfall, also where it fit into the federal requirements and the programs that we could apply for, because it was very limited because it was going through the specific EPA programs. So,
okay.
And it's where we knew we had sort of like a gap to fill in because there was so much community focus on Lincoln.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I just didn't know if the Stormwater Commission, their recommendations had been taken into account, but I couldn't remember if how they had prioritized things for that.
Yeah, and it sort of fits into the whole puzzle, right? Because we have just under $7.5 million of ARPA money, 7.4. Now we'll have this 400,000, and then debt, and so we'll fund them all. It's just the color of money and how we're bringing it all together. Mm-hmm. And at the time, Lincoln was important, but we didn't know if we got this grant, which is another point. We actually applied in May of 2021 for this 400,000, and so not being sure if it would come out of the federal process approved, we didn't target it for the top 6 either.
Okay, excellent. I'm glad can you remind me again where the project is taking place? It's sort of at the western end of Lincoln. Is that right? Near West Street?
Tony, could I have you jump in and provide some specifics on location?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, the Lincoln Avenue for the $400,000 is the Lincoln Avenue project that was selected by the commission, the Stormwater Advisory Board, during their stay, and it is located to the far west on Lincoln Avenue. So it would be west of Northwest Street.
Oh, west of West. Okay. All right. Thank you. We don't need to spend a lot of time on it. I'm just mindful that there's a lot happening on Lincoln. I think between the stormwater project and the greening Lincoln Avenue, and there's a street rebuild. Yeah, there's a lot happening on that street. So I just want to be sure that we're really thinking about all those projects together in a holistic way.
Yeah, that's a great segue, if you don't mind, Mr. Stevens. I've actually working with Tony and asked him to put together a chart, which we had one before, but now we have more money and more definitive stuff on all the transportation and stormwater. So he's working with the transportation team and stormwater, and we'll have a chart that tries to list all those projects in time, years, and fiscals, because they can't all happen concurrently, but we're trying to do them logically, comply with funding requirements, but also not have the area in a constant churn for 5 years. So in, I would say, a week or two, we'll probably have a nice summary chart where we're going to put it all together. We just want to make sure it's accurate, and we've had everybody vet it.
That sounds great to me. So let's see. I guess I just had a couple bigger picture questions. I really appreciated all the questions that Mr. Stevens sent and your answers to those. So thank you for that. I did notice in the as I was reviewing the materials, I was just thinking about the number of projects that we have in the CIP, and I think I noticed in the materials that we are adding about 3 to 8 per year, but it looks like we're completing roughly 2 to 3. So it makes me think that maybe the number of projects that we have in the CIP is kind of growing over time. Is that a fair description of what's been happening in recent years?
Yes, and part of that is, we're still clearing off the backlog. So when you add 2 or 3, it's just, grows it, but the net is growing. And some of that will be, hopefully, like with stormwater, we'll marry up a couple and kind of work them as one, but they'll show as 2 or 3 projects. And then hopefully we're also, while we're not doing a dramatic staffing upgrade to accelerate a lot of projects, it hopefully will mean that we're bringing enough staff in, and you'll see in attachment 7 my reference to bringing in more procurement and contracting staff so that we can actually work more projects and not grow it, but move us forward, but not net increase more than we're taking off the books. I think we're still in a transition in that kind of arena.
Okay. Yeah, I know that you all have been very successful at winning grants, winning all of these many funding opportunities out there. So if it were up to me, I would say let's do all of these projects, and I know that's not possible. Like, there may be even desirable for the community, but may not possible for this current staff that we have now. So I noticed a lot of references to cost escalations that are happening because these projects are taking longer than originally anticipated, or there are delays. So I know that there are costs to the projects end up being quite a bit more expensive than we originally anticipated. We have to go back out and find more money. So I don't know. I don't have the answer for that, but I do worry about our staffing levels. I know that the city has a lot of projects that they would like to complete, and I don't know that there are enough of you to do all of them. As
I would say
talented as you all
the staff concur with you. This is a constant dialogue that we have, and if I could see my staff's faces, I'm sure they're nodding right now. So part of that, I do want to acknowledge that some of the new ads we're doing are in the out years, because some of our grant monies, we're applying for FY 26, 27, 28. So we couldn't work them even if we wanted to, because we don't have the money. And we've been doing a much more deeper dive into those cost estimates and building in some more contingencies, because we know we're doing out years. Now, right now and during COVID, we've been seeing, an escalation of costs that normal contingency and escalation couldn't have captured. And so that's why several of the CIP projects that are before you this evening have grown because of the recent cost escalations. The community center HVAC, for one, I increased it by $200,000 from when we did our initial, and fellows was $100,000. So those are 2 examples. Fortunately, they're still taxpayer dollars, but they're federal tax dollars, so it doesn't impact the local as much as we try to accommodate that cost escalation. This is sort of in Mr. Stevens' questions, but it's a great segue to yours. So I do want to acknowledge the staffing capacity piece. In the proposed budget, which will come out on March 28th, we are near finalizing, and so I can't put any specifics out this evening, but we are looking to put in additional staffing around, in particular, the contracts and procurement piece, both in the finance function for managing grants and complying, and then in the public works planning side for implementing projects. And that's because with the ARPA money, we're using kind of an additional $18 million of federal money.
Mhm.
So that's amping up those kind of requirements. So we are trying to address it, because with all of the CIP projects, we're building in project management and engineering and contracts, right? So we can charge to the project management, which allows us to up and down staffing a little better. And we've ramped that up quite a bit in the last few years, which is why you're seeing projects getting completed. But we get bottlenecked at the federal level. If we can only do 2 federal IFBs a year, we're just going to backlog again. So we're trying to bring in new resources. So I hope after Mr. Shields and Ms. Bawa finish their deliberations and we go to print about this Friday, then we'll have some additional information that we can share, and you'll see it in the public deliberations.
All right, terrific. Well, good luck. I hope your team will grow. We can do all these many projects. I did have one more specific question, and I was noticing that there's the section about traffic signals. That those cost about $3,000 a year, can cost as much as $11,000 if significant repairs or upgrades are required. And we have 29 traffic signals in the city currently. I've always thought that there are a few traffic signals that we might not need to have, specifically the ones at Park and Little Falls, and perhaps also Little Falls and Great Falls. I know, there may be some disagreements on that, but I'm wondering, I think in the past we've talked about looking at whether those signals could be removed, maybe testing them as 4-way stops, for a period of time. So I guess I'm thinking about that when I'm thinking about the CIP. Are there things that we can remove that we no longer need to pay for? That would be, I think something that I would be interested in looking at.
And staff have done some preliminary work on that. Little Falls and Park, for example, we were having trouble with the traffic controller. So there was a period of time where it went on all 4 red. So we were sort of testing out the 4-way stop concept by default because of equipment. But we haven't made any final decisions, and kind of wanted to finish the neighborhood traffic calming work that we had done in that area. Little Falls and Park in particular was done with federal money. So you need to wait to the proper duration so we don't have to pay back the federal money. So there's a few things
That's
like
right.
that that we have in consideration that we work through, as you all have mentioned, the moving parts. But that is something I think that is worthy of looking at. And as a side note, with the $10 million Smart City grant that we have up at West Falls project, that was Senator Sasso got the money for us, and we're working with Virginia Tech. Or VTTI, their technology institute, we will be able to use some of that money to enhance and improve our traffic signals and upgrade some of them, which will reduce costs, but also will allow us to do better timing, signalization, priority for buses. So that'll focus on the prime commercial areas and allow us to revisit some of the ones that are on the secondary roads. They're still a high traffic area, but more residential.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have for now. It's a lot of the topics that I'm interested in were covered in Mr. Stevens's questions, so I just look forward to the conversation about those.
The pressure's on. Let's see, is there any other commissioners who would like to make comments or ask questions? I suspect we'll open up a bit more when we get into making our motion for adoption, but at this stage it's kind of less constrained. If anybody would like to take the opportunity. Okay, well, like I said, I think when we get into our motion to adopt, we'll probably generate some more discussion. Okay, Ms. Nestor, you've alluded to it several times. Why don't we jump into the set of questions that I asked, and I was very surprised that that staff took the time to go through and make what I thought were rather detailed answers. I certainly wasn't expecting that, but I appreciate it. But there's a few that I wanted to touch on. So if we have that attachment.
That's attachment 7. And I do want to thank staff, many of them who are on this meeting tonight, because I basically took your 15 questions and assigned them out to everybody who's sort of a lead in an area and then consolidated. So staff were great. And since I had a lot of emails, I went ahead and put it in a written document, even though you were kind enough to say that we could just do it verbally this evening, but I thought it'd be helpful for the public record as well. So is there specific ones you'd like to touch on, or would you like me to just do a highlight and kind of...
Well, why don't I touch on a few of them, and maybe, like I say, I kind of skimmed these replies, so I don't want to get into too much detail before I have a chance to kind of think about them in a little bit more detail. Also, I imagine staff was terribly thankful to me by submitting all these questions, but I do appreciate the replies. On the first one, on the North Washington Street POA, that is really kind of come into the forefront here recently. There's really no, as you know, there's no traffic signal at the Gresham Place, Washington Street. And it worked in the past because the traffic light that's closest to that intersection was timed so that people entering and exiting into Gresham Place could do so safely with the assistance of a traffic signal. Turns out that the signal is controlled by Arlington, even though the main signal that's of interest to us is actually within the city's boundary. The controlling capability apparently is in the county. And a change was made right before Thanksgiving that really created a significant safety hazard. And we had, unfortunately, no luck in trying to reach out to the traffic engineers in Arlington to, first of all, be aware of what change had taken place and to dialogue with us to understand what the safety issue was. So fortunately, we had the help of Council Member Duncan, who brought his trusty camera down and took a video of what was going on with a red light that was red for 2 seconds before it would send cars out into the middle of the intersection to have oncoming traffic come right into them. And when he sent that around, we finally got some help to make some improvements in that light, that signal light for Gresham Place. It's still not where it probably should be and where it was for about a dozen years before the change was made right before Thanksgiving. But what it points to is that without the control and the oversight within the city, it does create issues. And to have citizens of one jurisdiction kind of go and ask another jurisdiction for help on changing a light that's located in their jurisdiction. So it's not in our experience, it hasn't been a good situation. And it seemed like at least a solution was proffered by having the Washington Street POA proposed to have not only a bunch of very good pedestrian improvements along Washington Street, but also a full signalized arrangement there at Gresham Place. You may recall from last year, our chairman from last year indicated that signal was also needed so that you could have a crosswalk, because you can't really have a crosswalk when you don't have a signal. So that was, an important part. And there's a lot of people that cross from on the other side of Washington Street to come over and make use of Isaac Crossman Park. There's a lot of people that use that park, and they have many of them have to cross Washington Street. So there's a lot of justification to have this project move ahead, and hopefully under more of the oversight of the city. So that's a bit long-winded on my part, but just wanted to give you a little bit of what was behind my question and where I hope we can ultimately head regarding that project.
Well, I appreciate that, and Allie and I can follow up with Zach and our transportation team, with Arlington, see if there's any more refinement in the near term. In the sort of the traffic signal discussion that I mentioned in terms of our smart city grant, that's the kind of signalization timing coordination we want to do, but also to have our equipment in the city where we can. And we have that same issue on West Falls end, right? Because Haycock and 7, the Highway Broad, depending on which jurisdiction you're in, is in Fairfax County. And so we have that same kind of coordination issue as you're then coming into the city signals. So hopefully with some of the newer technology, this new technology will also allow our staff to remote in and adjust and manage the timing and the clocks in our signals, which right now cannot be remote done. And so you have to go back and reset the clock sort of manually. And then also to the bigger plan, the North Washington, I'll ask Carrie to chime in with any of her thoughts and reactions to your comments. But we were excited to put that grant in. It's the second time we've applied for that grant. When we did it the first time, we had 2 really positive ones and only one could get scored. Timing wise, we needed West Falls and all the work we're doing around the old high school area and those intersections. So I'm optimistic for this one, but of course it's still got to be funded, and then it's in an out year, and delay implementation will mean that full signal work that we do with our neighbors will be down the road a bit. But Carrie, are there any points that you would want to highlight to the traffic signals, comments and concerns, or just the grant project in general?
I'll leave the traffic signal issue to the engineers, but in terms of the grant, we should be getting some sort of draft scoring between late March and sort of mid-April, and we'll have a better idea of where we are in terms of the funding with that project.
One other thing I would just add on that from a pedestrian standpoint, there's narrative in the CIP that talks about wanting to make it easier for pedestrians to walk to the East Falls Church Station, and that certainly is very true. But I would also suggest adding in some language that addresses the need to accommodate increasingly, I believe, pedestrians walking towards Broad and Washington. As we put in the new developments there, there's going to be a lot more interest on the part of a number of apartment buildings, whether it's the ones that are in the city close by, or the Westley and the Crescent apartments. There's quite a few people that live there that I think would be very attracted to the new amenities that we're going to be commercial and likewise otherwise up at Broad and Washington. And right now, walking along the sidewalks is very intimidating, because you've got cars, trucks coming at you generally about 40 miles an hour coming downhill and right into the pedestrian traffic walking towards Broad and Washington. So that may be something to consider to add to that there's really a pedestrian traffic going 2 ways there that could benefit from that project.
And staff definitely concur, and that will be part of the design. Just to be upfront, when we're applying for certain money, you have to target it to what they're looking for. And with MBTA, you're looking at regional traffic flows, congestion mitigation, getting to other modes of transit, or transportation. So in this case, we were looking to the East Falls Church Metro as part of the scoring, but it will have full pedestrian access. That internally, we know we need to have people come to our downtown and be able to cross the street safely and so forth. So those good points for staff to be aware of as we're looking at the design functions.
Good, thank you. On the second one, I think we talked about that. I would certainly echo Commissioner Kumon's concern about needing more staff. So I would kind of align myself with that sentiment as well. Am I correct that overall city staff has remained fairly constant over the last decade?
We had a pretty significant drop in the 2009 downturn, and then just before COVID, we had gotten back up to that staffing level. We held positions vacant, obviously, for COVID while we were looking at revenue loss. So we're now filling them. So I would say we're pretty consistent to the 2009, 2010 staffing levels. mid-time this year, and what I think we'll see in the proposed budget, you'll see an increase to be able to start responding to project delivery, things like we're looking at tonight, but also public safety and some other areas. So no dramatic big increase because we got to be sensitive to the tax rate, but I think you'll see some growth in that area when the proposed budget comes out.
See, we like staff so much, we want to see more. So
we love to see more of them too, because it means we can deliver services. But it is a balance, because when you get somebody new, they aren't 100% delivering either. So we got to make sure we can staff it, time it to the money. It's actually kind of good. We can do a lot more remote work or field work now because City Hall is not growing. So, the building is there. We just renovated. So we need to be able to, post-COVID, flex office space a little bit more. And because we brought in cubicles, of course, when we renovated for more staff interaction, but airflow crosses over them. So we had to adjust for the 6 feet separation. So, yes, thank you for the staff support.
Indeed. I'm also mindful that whenever we do the fiscal impact model, that it always shows, the additional staff to go along with the new projects. Of course, that's theoretical. So, but it does provide a basis and a justification for the actual adding of staff in budgets. So, on the third one with the HVAC, it looks like the plan at the moment is to keep that as a gas boiler. The only thing I would say is, we have certainly moved a lot in the last couple of years. Say we, people that kind of dabble in the environmental issue, to a situation where, especially in Virginia, where we have the new legislation, the Virginia Clean Economy Act, that is going to clean up the grid quite a bit over the next 20 years, so that anything that uses electricity is going to increasingly have lower emissions. And so the push is really to get many of the things that use natural gas in our homes and businesses to transition over to all electric as a very potent strategy to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. So, if we go ahead and make these rather detailed and substantial changes to the HVAC system at the community center, it seems to me it's going to lock that system in for a good 20 years. And it just seems to be going in the wrong direction. So I would just ask for consideration of maybe asking a contractor to say, what would it, could you do this all electric? I realize there's keen interest in the economic efficiency, but increasingly we need to be aware of the impact on greenhouse gas emissions and what we need to be doing to address it. So that's the only comment that I thought I would make on that. Otherwise, I appreciate all the detail. There's obviously a lot that's going on there, and it looks like a pretty substantial renovation.
Yeah, I think it'll be significant and well needed. This is a synopsis from the fuller project sheet, and if you look at that, you'll see that everything's end of life, 20, 30 years, and it's really right now we're down to there's one air handling unit and duct tape. So it was going to be in the CIP. I'm very grateful that we have a federal funding source that we can help offset. And so I will pass that feedback on to Public Works. We've only had a preliminary concept design, which is sort of outlined here with one of our on-call contractors, and pending money, then we can get into a deeper dive. And of course, President Michael provided you the information on the Mary Ellen Henderson rationale for that. So if there's any questions, but otherwise, we've heard your comments, and we'll see what we can do, sort of the balance.
Right. You may hear some from the ESC as well.
Sure.
We can go on to was it Q4 maybe? I can't quite see it, Mr. Gears.
That's this rooftop solar system.
Yeah, we had Secure Future. That's right. They're a solar company. BEPA's funded a study about 3 years or so ago. And at the time, at least, it sounded like Oak Street Elementary could take on a system. So, and that would be via the Fairfax. You're probably familiar with this, Ms. Mester, the contract from Fairfax County that we can ride and get a system as a power purchase agreement, which means we don't have to front the capital. So So that may be something. We don't have many buildings in the city that can take a solar system, but as I recall, the Oak Street School is one that can. So I'll just pass on that observation.
As I mentioned, Kristen's here, so she heard that, and that isn't an out year for the fuller construction, so there's time to assess options.
And we are very excited to look at continuing to expand our solar, and Oak Street is a great option. So we share your enthusiasm.
Thank you. Okay, Q5 is a repeat of my proposal from last year to come up with an overall plan for the city to convert our fleet to electric. So I know we're making progress, so I guess we'll kind of keep pushing on that.
I do want to know the police ones, the police four that I mentioned here were FY21 money, and we've been waiting to actually get them. And first it was the chip and then the battery recall. So we've had a lot of issues. So hopefully we'll be getting them soon. They're back in production. We actually have money in FY22, this current year, to buy another police vehicle, but we can't order it yet because they were backlogged because of all the others. So fingers crossed, we'll continue to move slowly. And as I mentioned, we have the 3 school buses coming online as well.
Very good. Commissioner Weiss?
Yeah, I just wanted to interject on that just for a minute, because and I hear all of that. I think, the question is there an overall plan being developed? And that relates to something in the comprehensive plan report card that asks, is there a procurement policy in place for green procurement for the city? And the response to that in the comprehensive plan grade was to say, we have procured X, we have procured Y. But I think the answer to that is that should actually be no, because I don't think we have an actual green procurement policy yet. And so I just wanted to kind of just underline that. And I'm not questioning anybody's integrity, but I think we just don't have a green procurement policy. And so when it comes to like the comprehensive plan report card, I would like to see answers kind of like, is there a policy? No, there isn't. We've done these things, but we don't have a policy, and we don't have plans to develop a policy because we don't have the staffing for it or whatever. But, I just think that this related to that. So I just kind of wanted to underline it there. So like some more planning around this kind of procurement, I think would be very helpful.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Question 6 goes to protected bike lanes. So I think there's interest increasing in the city, as I see it, to start some type of a program to add bike lanes on a kind of a regular basis, kind of like we've done now. We've been successful with sidewalks. We've added money there, and in traffic calming, I think we've done that very well. So I think people looking for the next horizon would be protected bike lanes. That seems to be the gold standard. I mean, there's some of us, me included, I guess, who would just go ahead and bike on our streets the way they are and just do the best we can. But for a lot of people, for them to really feel comfortable, they need a protected bike lane. So that really is the gold standard. So I'm hoping that at some point we can move in the direction of getting some type of a stable source of funding and set up targets for how much protected bike lanes we want on an ongoing basis. So that's that one.
So noted, and that's another planning area to tie in as well.
Commissioner Comat?
Sorry, yeah, can I just add, I'm also a big proponent for bicycle infrastructure in the city. And I was excited to see the recommendation for an update for the bicycle master plan, which I think was 2014, 2015 maybe. So I think that city's already changed a lot. And certainly the destinations within the city have changed a lot and will continue to change as these new projects are built. So I think looking at that plan again makes a lot of sense. I think it would be a great idea to approach a university class to have them do a studio to look at locations for protected bike lanes. Reviewing the materials, I noticed there was one reference to bike share phase 2, and I was just wondering if you all could remind me of what that entails. Maybe Carrie might know.
Carrie, that or anything on the university, if you're aware of that, or if that's something Mr. Jim Snyder's doing. But Carrie, for bike share?
Yeah, so we have reached out to a university, but we've sort of not. We've not. That was sort of recent, so we've not heard back or arranged for that. But so that's something that we're looking at. But in terms of bike share phase 2, that was something that came out of the public engagement process from bike share phase 1, where there were some stations that we weren't able to get in with phase 1 because of the federal funding and the requirement that a permanent easement be in place for stations that were purchased with federal funds. And there were some locations where we didn't have public right-of-way or permanent easement available. And so there were 2 or 3, there were several locations that came out. We did those pop-up tables at the farmers market and a couple of other locations. And then there was an online map for feedback. And then we had a public meeting as well. And so there were several locations where folks had noted that they might want a station that sort of wasn't included with that first phase. And that funding currently, I believe, is in FY 2025 for phase 2 for the equipment. So yeah, so I think that's
Okay. So those were the locations that they were on the wish list, but were not possible at the time. Yeah, I really love what we've been doing with bike share, and I'd love to see us help support the bike share that we're creating and all the many bicycle racks that we're installing by actually creating real protected bicycle infrastructure. So you can go and you can rent a bike or borrow a bike and ride it safely around the city. Feel comfortable doing that, because I think the situation right now is, you might go patronize a Capital Bike Share station, but not really, it's not really near any bicycle facilities. It's not really in a very safe place to ride. So I know these are difficult changes to make and that they will take time, but I just want to make sure that we are planning for them and thinking about them. And as Mr. Stevens mentioned, setting funding aside for them. I think it's a much more economical infrastructure development it's a lot cheaper, I think, building bicycle infrastructure than it is to build many of our other kinds of infrastructure. So I hope we can find the funding for that as well.
All good points, and I think that'll be part of any good in community engagement, to hear all the voices and hearing that, because of course on some of our roads to do a protected dedicated bike lane is going to impact parking. It's sort of the same discussion we have with neighborhood traffic calming. We can narrow the road, but what's the trade-off? And so I think the Planning Commission, CACT, ESC, we have some good community advisors that can help us facilitate that conversation in a way where the city comes out, and doing that around the bike master plan would be helpful in some of the pedestrian work we do.
Absolutely. I'll be there.
Okay, moving ahead there, question 7 is a bit of a nudge to see if there isn't some way to move ahead the crossings, trail crossings on the WNOD. I hear a lot not very nice comments from my biking buddies who say, "What is Falls Church doing?" and then I have to tell them, well, right now it's going to be another 3 or 4 years before before work can start on the trail crossing. So I know there's complexity there, there's issues, but at least I thought, I should say something about it. And I know that there's some of the other commissioners, if not all, are eager to see if there isn't a way to come up with some ability to accelerate that work and make use of those very nice dual trails that have been placed there.
Yes, and staff acknowledges and hears it as well. I did add to the comment a note about the procurement because that's one of our pinch points again. And so that's where I'm hopeful with some of the additional resources that we hope to bring to bear during this next budget deliberation conversation with council. And Carrie, is there anything in particular that you could add? I know you noted for me where we are on the designs, and then, we had some unexpected delays that just had to be worked through, but any updates on schedules?
The consultant did confirm that they think that they can deliver the final plans next week. We did have pretty extensive delays because the original survey was inaccurate, and that was something that was found when the Dual Trails project went into construction. They were finding some inconsistencies. We were not able to do like an updated survey until that construction of the Dual Trails project was done, because they were making changes. So that the projects being sort of enmeshed sort of complicated things and did delay us quite a bit. I think, I think that's sort of, we're almost done with design here, and then we can sort of move into the procurement process. But that was the biggest reason for the delay.
And we did some work in the stormwater area where, while Dual Trails was running the part of the stormwater that they could do there, so we didn't undo it later. So unfortunately, they didn't run concurrently, and then we had the points that Carrie noted. So we acknowledge it. We know it needs to be moved, but we're within some of it we couldn't control, and we're trying to keep it moving forward.
Okay. Thank you. Question 8, that was kind of more of a matter of interest. I'm always impressed that you can come up with 70% of the CIP funding from grants. And I was just curious, how does that compare with other jurisdictions? Do they have a Cindy Mester likewise accomplishing the same thing?
Well, as Cindy Mester plus team, I need to acknowledge that. I don't really know. I think I see a lot of grant applications going in, but how localities match. And some of it, as I noted, is to keep the debt service down. And if you don't have pay-go and you want to do these community projects, you go for the grants. So I'd love to have it all pay-go, actually, be less complex, but that's not realistic. And it doesn't leverage our other resources at the state and federal levels. So.
Pay-go is not a dirty word, but free money's not bad either.
Yep.
Okay.
It's all taxpayer dollars. It's just a different source. And if you all are always already paying for it, we might as well bring it home.
Very good. Very good. Okay. On 9, it sounds like we control the doors, but not the roof.
Well, it's a package deal under the interjurisdictional agreement. So we pay for the capital, but Arlington executes it and does the full assessment plan, and they pay for the maintenance. So I just wasn't able to connect with them to get all the data to respond holistically to your question. So we'll follow up. We basically pay for the capital, and they do all the execution and the systems assessments and lay out the strategy or life cycles.
Sure. The other thing that was in the back of my mind here is that raised seam metal roofs are actually pretty good to install a solar system because you don't have to penetrate the roof. And so, you can buy the panels to fit right in those spaces, and I won't say clip them in. There's obviously more to it than that, but it's not the same as having to go through an asphalt shingle type of a roof. So whenever I walk by that firehouse and I see that beautiful roof there, has terrific exposure to the sun, I think, well, there's an opportunity that we didn't quite take advantage of. So anyway, I get your point.
We can keep that in mind. And as Ms. Teese will recall, we've had Fire Station 6 in the CIP forever because a lot of the initial design and construction was value engineered and did residential. So, we had residential windows and residential heat pumps all around that building. So I can't speak to the roof and its end of life and how much is left. But in general, I found we underscoped and built this prior to most of our time. And we're trying to get it caught back up to being able to survive 24/7 high use of a public safety facility. So I will follow up with information when I can connect with Arlington's Environmental Services Department.
Sure. Whenever you see an ad for a metal roof, it's always because it lasts twice as long as a... Yeah. Anyway, on question 10, Carrie Odino did some nice research on that. So I think, as I understand it, this will come back to the Planning Commission for our comment at the 60% design level. Is that correct?
Carrie, you want to take that one?
I think it was coming back at 30%, because concept plans had come before. But Allie, I think Allie can speak to that.
Yeah, I was going to give Allie the next chance. Thank you, Allie. And you're unmuted now.
Yeah, sure. Good evening, everybody. So on that, the plan that we have right now is the plans are right now at a 30% design phase. The city has reviewed the 30% plans, and right now the plans are with VDOT for review. So what the CIP team is planning to do is, once we get the comments back from VDOT on those 30% plans, we are trying to kind of schedule some sort of public hearing for this project. And kind of post a notice to hold a hearing for the public on the project, and also maybe the next step after that would be to present it to the council, where we're going to have hopefully our design consultant on board as well to do sort of a brief presentation of the project, and followed by questions and answers if needed. So.
And that piece we could coordinate with the Planning Commission, or
exactly right,
either with the public hearing or with the council, kind of do a joint effort.
That's exactly right.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that update. And we look forward to your presentation. Okay. The next one was just a nomenclature thing. I just thought pedestrian, bicycle, traffic calming, those three fit together, but then all of a sudden bridges.
That's another way, is Carrie helped me answer the question. We're going for money that can fill a gap, and you need a bridge and inspection, and it's an eligible activity under that federal funding source. And we do always try to get those pedestrian accessibility, mobility pieces added to our bridges, so that they're not just for vehicular traffic.
Yep, good.
So we'd like to keep you on your toes, and I'm glad to know you're reading it.
Of course.
Well, thank you.
So much good information in the CIP. On 12, I think that is self-explanatory. This is another area where I think there would be interest over time. Right now, it just seems like we underground wires and remove obstacles on an opportunistic basis in conjunction with redevelopment. But, we may well be to the point now, given our strong desire to improve our walkability, bikeability, and so forth, that we start to look for some dedicated funding to keep moving this. I know that it's terribly expensive to do this undergrounding, and there's always the possibility in the background that Dominion might finally get approval from for the state to kind of implement a more aggressive undergrounding program. But it just seems like this may be something that we want to devote a little bit more attention to over time. Obviously, it's not going to happen this year, but in the future.
Yeah, that's why we're doing sort of the ADA sidewalk transition plan, which is federally mandated, but most of our, or a lot of our issues are poles in the middle of the sidewalk. There's problems at the intersections and ramps and stuff, but most of them are the obstacles, as you noted. So we will be doing that. And that's why, like with Park Avenue, it's a big, expensive project, but part of that is to underground the rest of Park Avenue, which, Allie, I'm trying to remember, I think it's about $4 million to underground from State Theater to the library.
That's right, Cindy. Yeah.
So, and then as a side note, I'd love it if Dominion got a little bit more authority to do it. Of course, it does feed into the rates, so there's a trade-off. But they do have a pilot project. They're just out of funding right now to do residential undergrounding. And that's their strategic undergrounding program that you all may have heard about. And they've done 5 projects in the city, which were actually one of the higher numbers. And that's because Tree City USA, a lot of homeowners lose power because of the trees and the power lines, but also we actually work really closely to help facilitate the community engagement. So a lot of other localities, the projects die because they can't get the number of citizens to sign the easements, and we've been very successful. And it's, I think, in some areas really reduced outage times because we're more resilient. But that one's hard because most of those power lines in the residential are running behind streets or there's no right of way, and so then we have to deal with how do we, narrow the street, do it unexpected neighborhood traffic calming if we can't get the easements from the private homeowner. And I will give credit to council because we had one project over in Lawton that almost got stopped because of one final easement, and you all might see if anybody's over at Madison Park, we just kind of crossed the undergrounding easement and the final transformer that needed to be placed over at Madison Park at an area where there's not active use. So yeah, but I agree overall we need a strategic plan. But it's not inexpensive.
Not inexpensive, but you got to start at least by having people say, gee, I think we'd like this. So I guess maybe that's the role that I'm playing here. I was kind of made sensitive to this a little bit when we were dealing with the Broad and Washington project here recently. And we kind of learned, I'm too late into the project, unfortunately, that a couple of the telephone poles right next to Clarendon's along Park Place were not going to be removed as part of the project, even though other poles along there that are on the inside property will be undergrounded. So it seemed like, that work was going to be proceeding, and it would have been a good opportunity, even albeit at a lot of money, but we could have had that whole street undergrounded at one time. So,
and Allie, if you could remind me, I believe we are adjusting the scope of Park Avenue so we can address that pole issue.
That's exactly right. We have revised the scope to include the undergrounding of those 2 utility poles in front of Clarendon. That's right.
But that is a good point. We need to look at that holistically when we're doing
right.
redevelopment. And then there'll be some redevelopment or areas which won't redevelopment because they're church properties. So then we may need to have the city initiate that undergrounding.
Yep. It's not easy. Okay. 13, I think your explanation I get. It's those lights that they're talking about, those little solar assisted lights. I'm sure some people might have looked at that comment and said, are they going to put a solar farm at the Fellows property? No, I don't think so. Okay. Okay, 14, you've answered. I think that pretty much gets it. What I was doing. I mean, I've toured both of those plants, the one in Alexandria and Arlington, and they're just night and day, at least the time that I toured that. And it would be nice if the Arlington plant could take on some of the capabilities that were built into the Alexandria facility. Okay, 15. I am going to defer to Commissioner Weiss on this one because she knows a lot more than I do about this.
I'll just say I know enough to be dangerous, but dangerous I will be, or at least an irritant. So I thank you, Commissioner Stevens, for asking this question and staff for responding. This is another area where, we don't, to my knowledge, have a plan. We don't have a comprehensive green infrastructure plan, meaning like a map of the city and identifying opportunistic, the ideal opportunities to place green infrastructure so we can opportunistically do that when projects arise. We don't have a climate resilience plan. And I think as far as just from my vantage point, it does seem like we're getting more green infrastructure where we can, but I don't know if it's going into the right places at the right time and the right volumes. Recognizing that green and gray infrastructure have to work together. We can't do all green infrastructure. We shouldn't be doing all gray infrastructure. So, I'm pleased to see the progress that we are making. I guess I would just say, or just ask, when you sort of comb through the CIP and the comprehensive plan and the SAP sort of report cards, I think we're taking kind of a scattershot approach. And I guess I would ask, that we see if we can follow up on some of the comprehensive plan actions. So I'll just, in the report card, like in the comprehensive report card, there's a mention of buying properties in the floodplain. We had that transfer development right discussion, and the response in the report card says, TDR was considered. I'd like to know what happens next, right? Or at least just acknowledge in that report card that it was considered and not pursued for whatever reason why. In Downtown Falls Church, in that SAP report card, there is an action to reduce stormwater runoff by 20 to 30%, and there's no response there. There in the comprehensive plan policy report card, there's two places where I think we could see some green infrastructure and we're not seeing it yet. So one, this is in the Environment for Everyone short-term action plan. There's an action to develop a climate risk assessment and a climate resilience plan for the city, and the response is that there's a draft climate change mitigation energy action plan that's in the procurement process, which is terrific. We absolutely need that. But as far as I can see from looking at the CCMEP, which is one of my favorite acronyms ever, that's really more about mitigation, which, yes, is part of resilience, but resilience is broader than that. And that's, one place where we think about resilience is precipitation is going to go up. We're going to have more severe storms. What is our plan for being resilient with respect to our stormwater infrastructure? And with respect to the comprehensive plan, I don't think the CCMEP is the right response to, do we have a climate risk and resilience plan in place? I think the answer is, well, no, we don't have one and we need one. Similarly, right after that, there's an action to establish an infrastructure policy, which specifically says encourage the use of green rather than gray infrastructure features, and there's no response there. And I'm saying that to paint a picture that, it's kind of a scattershot approach. We've said we want this. I think we need it, but we don't have a plan. I think that, probably a lot of that is just capacity reasons. There's a lot going on, but we're going to get more rain. We're going to get more storms. We're putting in more gray infrastructure. And I just think we need to just act on that action item in the comprehensive plan to develop a climate resilience plan and to think more holistically about where green infrastructure fits with gray infrastructure and how we're reducing, our storm situation as much as we can while future-proofing that infrastructure. And the last piece is I wanted to reflect on the environmental lens that's applied to the comprehensive plan and looking at that piece of the CIP where we sort of ask the question of our stormwater projects. The project in the CIP is actually multiple projects together, and the lens, the environmental lens, asks of all four of those projects at the same time, is this going to improve our resilience? And the answer is yes, it's going to reduce flooding. But I think we need to look more deeply than that. And it's this gray infrastructure that we're putting in. It's all cost money, but like this hard infrastructure that's really hard to redo, is that going to withstand? Have we done some sort of trade-off or modeling, like not looking back at our historic stormwater, situation, but looking forward at the various temperature scenarios for the precipitation that we're likely to see? Are we resilient to the 2-degree scenario? Are we resilient to the 4-degree scenario, which is what we're currently on? And I don't see that happening yet. So just wanted to reflect that I'm not sure if that lens is really working in this case, which is how I'd sort of been thinking about it. So hopefully that made sense. That was a lot, but thank you.
I do appreciate it, for sure. Let me respond to a few small things, and I'm glad Tony's here to hear this and maybe has some comments on the lens. That's the kind of feedback we'd like, because this is the first time we did the environmental lens, and so we were thinking about it as the stormwater flooding mitigation program. You're looking at it within the program, so there'll be some refinement we can do that's helpful. Anything else on the equity lens, we'll take that feedback as well, since that was just year 2. To date, our project has been one, we weren't dealing with stormwater, now we are. So what we were doing was working off the former watershed management plan and really trying to address some of those imminent critical flooding, the urban inland flooding piece. So there was a lot of gray infrastructure, and I think the comments that you all raised last year at the CIP has started us on the greening, and we have some smaller projects now heading that way. Part of it also was funding. So for example, we knew what the task force big six were, and then ARPA came along and it could be a way to fund it, but when the first federal race came out, it was only for green and not gray, and we needed gray, and now we can do both, and we can do both with the hopeful $4 million that's in the state budget. So that'll give us the ability to start blending. Now that's still project specific, sort of still reactioning to the here and now as we catch up, but we've brought on staff, we've got money for these projects, and I know that the stormwater team is starting to look more holistically at that in the planning. And let me just pause and have Tony, if there's any initial updates that you'd like to comment on, sort of the more strategic big picture, and then of course we'll take this feedback as we move forward.
Okay, great. Because most of the funding that's available right now is, and it's a little dark where I am. I will turn on my camera, but I don't know if you'll be able to see me. Because of the fact that most of the funding out there right now currently does for stormwater related grants, namely trust water, clean water trust fund grants that are given to the state, and then you would actually compete for those. All your projects have to have a water quality component, all of them. And when ARPA dollars came up the first time, that was their assessment as well. All projects had to have a water quality component. So when we chose the projects that we did, we looked for any ways that we could add on that water quality component through the use of green infrastructure. And as the answer shows, Lincoln Avenue, for example, is purely a water quality and detention type project used to try to control the headwaters of the watershed and detain that water so that we can lessen the impact downstream, both through the actual flooding process as well as the money that it takes to fix those downstream problems. So we really are on track of looking at green infrastructure first to control the problem, and then only looking at hard gray infrastructure, as you would call it, as a kind of a last resort because of its expense. So I think we're well on track to do that. These projects show that we are looking towards that, and any other projects that we do in the future are going to have that. Are going to have mostly a green process to them. So.
And I know we've been updating our databases and our data and so much so that you could form that bigger strategic look as well, sort of capturing what our true issues are now.
Yeah,
I'm
the,
pleased to
the
say
Lincoln
there's- Mhm.
the Lincoln Avenue project will be a first. I would think to suggest that project, if all the pieces come together, could win awards. Honestly, with looking at how we detained water instead of and retained water instead of enlarging culverts under Broad Street, and that's how and it will have impact as far away as Broad Street, positive impact as far away as Broad Street. And with that and a few other projects mixed in, we will, we're working from upstream to downstream, and that's not how you used to do it. You used to do it from downstream to upstream, enlarging all the pipes as you went. Now we're trying to keep that flow back. And like I said in the answer, we're trying to reduce the flow upstream of Lincoln, which has 4 pipes essentially across it, down to pre-existing condition. That means woods and things like that, and no houses. We're going to try to get as close as possible on that.
And then we'll take your points about the resiliency plan and the mitigation, that holistic look back, and keep working that. I think we've gone from doing nothing really on stormwater to trying to sort of be where we are on a lot of our transportation planning. And we'll also look to the comp plan and area plans for our responses. If it's blank, it's like we weren't working on it. And then a lot of it is capacity, because some of the stuff you all have pointed out is really important planning piece. And we're trying to work projects. So important and valuable feedback. So thank you.
Yeah, and I appreciate hearing all that, and we have made a lot of progress, and I really appreciate that. I guess I would just, encourage you, to the extent that you have time and capacity, to look for that grant funding for some of that strategy, support, right? The sort of technical assistance to develop that comprehensive green infrastructure strategy. So we have that overlay, like a map of the city. So it's not just project by project, but I don't know, when we have the next new mixed use development, we already know the kind of green infrastructure and stormwater capture that we know there, and we can kind of build that into other parts of the plan as needed. So, but thank you.
Having a plan may help with grant applications as well. I had a somewhat similar reaction on the environmental lens on the mitigation side. First of all, I was very pleased to see that it was there, and I must say I enjoyed reading through a lot of the comments there, and the fact that it was tied back to the comp plan. I think that was very well done. But you can also readily imagine in future, opportunities that we could probably drill down a lot deeper. And as Commissioner Weiss says, certainly helps to have a plan to measure how much progress you're making, or perhaps not making. But anyway, thank you, Mr. Dudley. You're sharing your knowledge with us. I see that Commissioner Hyra has joined us, and not to put you on the spot, but what we were going through now is kind of comments and questions leading up to our adoption of a motion. So I was just wondering if you had any comments or questions that you wanted to make about the CIP documents.
Sure, always happy to chime in. So thank you, Mr. Stevens, and thank you to everybody for all of your comments. Corey, such good explanations on plans and the integration of multiple plans and overlays for our environmental work that we need to continue to do. And also our bike lanes, that's really important stuff. We do have a lot of bike infrastructure, but not a lot of bike lanes, and it is tough to bike around our city in a safe manner. So hopefully we can do a better job in building out the bike lanes, knowing that not everyone's going to be happy about it. Nobody wants to lose their parking spots, which they feel are near their homes, but sometimes that's what you got to do to have an amenity like a bike infrastructure that can help people get all around the city to a lot of our old and new destinations. But I guess, you probably all know where I'm going, or I'm going to end with, and it's kind of on the affordable housing. And Cindy, thanks for your presentation at our last meeting. I know it was late. But I know you started to do, and you did, a really good explanation about housing and why housing or affordable housing is sort of separate from the CIP. But and Mr. Stevens or Tim, I saw that you had put or circulated before the meeting something about an amendment to this, that we would try to broaden a discussion or at least include some affordable housing components next time we do this, maybe next year. And I think we should. I also think that we should do it this year, but I understand the ball is rolling, so we might not be able to change what we're doing now. But again, other cities have part of the CIP, affordable housing. Cindy, one thing I don't quite understand, and maybe you can answer this, is that on multiple occasions, multiple city staff have said that we are unable to own or operate as a city affordable housing. And so there must be some reason for that. And our chair and I have both looked at our city charter and the way at least we interpret it, that we absolutely can own and operate affordable housing, and other municipalities do it, and we kind of on an ad hoc basis, to be honest, do this. I mean, so it's odd when we hear that there is something either in our charter or there is some state statute that prevents our municipality compared to the other counties and municipalities in the state being able to have that capacity of owning and operating affordable housing. So I would love an explanation of why multiple people in the city have said that we can't do that. And also, regardless of whether we can, I don't think that's a rationale for not putting affordable housing in our long-term planning, which that's what the CIP is. It is long-term planning for the city. So for me, who has taught urban planning and teaches public policy, it is very hard for me to understand why we wouldn't have long-term planning part of our CIP and have affordable housing in it. And I do understand that it's not that we don't plan for affordable housing, we just put it somewhere else. But the CIP is really part of the long-term planning on many fronts around infrastructure, and housing is part of our city's infrastructure. So again, it doesn't make any sense to me why we wouldn't do long-term planning in the CIP that prioritizes what we care about as a city in this document. So I will stop. I know I probably went on and on a little bit too long, but at the same time, you guys can tell that I'm passionate about this and really have a tough time stomaching and managing why we don't do it, because other cities that I've lived in, worked in, studied in, do it. So why are we this exception? So I'll stop there, and maybe Cindy, you could address some of my comments. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you.
I'd be glad to, and I do value and appreciate the commitment. And that's why you'll see in the proposed motion I put forward, I did include some affordable housing so it could capture the focus. So a couple things to unpack. One, I do believe it has to be an important strategic planning, the affordable housing. I also teach planning and economic development as an adjunct professor at Virginia Tech. And one of the graphics I always use is a three-legged stool. And the seat is the community, and staff, the advisory, all engaged citizens are facilitating that community building, that good seat with all the amenities. It doesn't work if the three legs aren't even. For me, the three legs are economic development and planning, transportation, and affordable housing. I tend to use the word continuum of housing because everybody always adds negative connotations to whatever you call housing that's affordable. So I totally agree with you. I do think this locality is in a better place to actually be doing strategic planning on affordable housing than we've done in a long time. I've been here 17 years. I'm really excited about the energy that's around affordable housing now. We got a good, strong comp plan chapter on housing. We've updated the affordable living policy. And I think we actually just need a very strong strategic plan around housing. The issue that it gets down to is where is it housed? Right now it's in the operating budget on the Affordable Housing Fund. Theoretically, that's a standalone enterprise fund just as much as stormwater and sanitary sewer, so it should have the same amount of attention. And I've actually shared your all feedbacks with the CFO and the city manager. Hopefully in this next current budget process, we can focus more on it. The reason that it's not in the CIP from the perspective of governmental accounting is that it's for capital, it's things that the public owns and operates, and under state code for independent cities, chapter 15, and the city attorney will articulate this much better because she has done a deep dive on this question, because you have asked it, council's asked it, EDA, everybody has. And her legal interpretation, and she represents the city for this, is the city cannot own and operate affordable housing directly. The EDA can own but can't operate. And the operation is defined as having the policy and decision-making authority over the housing, tenant selection, rents, those kind of things. So yes, ad hoc we are, because we took advantage of opportunities in Virginia Village, for example, which is a very important area of focus right now, to acquire units. We didn't lose them. EDA can, the city owns one, EDA has bought the last recent 4, but they can't operate it, and a property management company doesn't meet the definition. So we are working to fix that and have a better, stronger partnership. And so I'm very positive where that's going. And council right now is putting $100,000 a year into affordable housing fund. Even with Mr. Duncan on, I'll be clear to say that's not enough. It's not going to get us anywhere. But we've been very fortunate because we've got $7.5 million of Amazon grant money, which we've never had before. And that tees us up for a very good possibility for low-income housing tax credits for redevelopment. We actually had $11 million of tax credits on a project in 2009. Economic downturn crashed that before we could build it. So that's some of what got us here. Now we see other localities that do it. They either have, counties have different state code requirements than cities. They're in a different section. Some, like Fairfax and Arlington, actually have executive branch of county authority, so it's a whole different ball wax. But a lot of them have a housing authority, and the housing authority is actually doing it, not the locality. It just happens to be the county fully funds the housing authority and usually provides the staff, even though it has an independent board, sort of like our EDA is staffed by city staff, but is independent, quasi-independent. So sometimes it's not really the locality, it's the housing authority. We have looked at that. That's really a cost prohibitive exercise for a small locality. So that's where we're looking at partnerships like with NHP for the Winter Hill Senior Housing, Wesley Housing for Virginia Village. We actually have just switched to Fairfax County Housing Development Authority on July 1 of this past year for our CDBG home money and all the other sort of human services access grants. And as part of that agreement, we can partner with them for future affordable housing and require some legal action by council, but we can invite in a housing development authority. So all that said, I think regardless of the thought of can we own or not own, or is this in the CIP or not, I think we have to have a strategic plan. I think there's avenues and ways to do this, and we can deliver it. It takes the localities' commitment and focus on it. And I have certainly been hearing that from the Planning Commission and you. I've been hearing it from the EDA. They just had the retreat. That's like the number one thing they're focusing on because, yes, it helps workforce and economic and everything, as you know. So I think if we keep that community energy on, we can get the focus on wherever we house it in the budget. We just need to keep the energy, commitment, and focus to it, and it takes money. So hopefully I've covered your thoughts on, hopefully, Vice Chair Stevens, I haven't gotten on my affordable housing soapbox too much because you could get me going on that too, because that's what I did for 22 years in Loudoun County before I came here to the city of Falls Church.
Well,
Amazingly, it's 17 years ago.
Yep, and there's strong support on city council. So it's an issue that whose time has come. When I talk to folks like former council member Steve Rogers about the difficulties that the city had with affordable housing, decades past, we've made a lot of progress, and the opportunity, I think, is ahead of us to make more. I would say that probably a parallel situation where I think the city attorney decided that, or interpreted that the city could not offer more than a 40-year lease for the West Falls project. So we knocked on the door of the Economic Development Authority and say, you do it for us. So I guess it accomplished the same thing, but through a somewhat circuitous route. So anything else, Commissioner Hyra?
No, I would just say thank you for providing all that context. But even with the context, I would still advocate that we have affordable housing part of the CIP. And you really explained the different ways that we as a city can own and operate and are owning and operating. But even if we couldn't, that doesn't mean we shouldn't do long-term planning. And it seems that the long-term planning that we do that gets the most visibility is in the CIP. Because we have comprehensive plans. I mean, we just went over how we have these plans all over the place, but to get these plans to come to fruition, it's about the CIP, right? And it's about getting external money to implement. So, I do understand, and you said we've updated our housing plan. There's more political will, there's more of a focus, but where does the rubber meet the road? In our CIP. So we need to have affordable housing in the CIP and not offline somewhere else where it's just another plan that we say we're interested in, that we say we're committed to, and we don't really have that much focus and energy for. So we have the Fairfax Housing Authority, which we can use as an entity. We have the EDA we can use as an entity. And then you even said, we kind of actually do own some housing. Maybe we won't do it long term. But
yeah, we're looking to transfer that to make it legal.
There,
yeah.
we're breaking it. And again, I don't think that rule should matter for whether we put plans in the CIP. So, and I just, again, I spent a lot of time in Alexandria. They do have a public housing authority, but they have many entities, including the city and the housing authority, which all do housing work and also do long-term planning on affordable housing, and their capital improvement budget and plan has affordable housing in it. So Alexandria is a city, a larger city than ours. We are a city. We should be doing things similar to in the manner that they are in terms of our long-term planning and execution on the affordable housing front. And I'm done. But thank you. I really appreciate all the work that you're doing. And housing is just one thing. Cindy, you mentioned, that there's a 3-legged stool. Maybe there's a 5-legged one. We have so many different things we're trying to execute and accomplish in the city to make it the most vibrant, livable city possible and the best city. And we want to attract a lot of people, and we want to maintain the infrastructure of the people that are here. We're doing tons of development. And I just think with all that development, we could make our city more equitable. And to make it more equitable, we have to have a greater focus on true affordable housing. And we have to have a much greater percent of our units be affordable than we currently have. And that requires long-term planning and also priority planning. And that's the CIP.
Appreciate that. And Vice Chair Stevens, if I may suggest, we can take this on and keep reviewing it and see if we could refine something for next year. And certainly we can look at other best practices. And then, so for this year, I hope that we can approve it as presented. As I noted not last week, 2 weeks ago, I put affordable housing in the summary sheet so it flag out, but maybe we could figure out a way to take that special standalone fund and connect it stronger to the CIP to get the outcome that you all are suggesting, and the commissioner is as well. So thank you.
Okay, well, all right, we have a job tonight, and that's to adopt a motion or make our recommendation to City Council. So perhaps it's a good time now to turn to that before the evening gets too much later. Why don't we, Mr. Garris, could you put up the draft that I sent you? This is the one that is from the staff report, right?
Yeah, that's the staff report one I proposed for your consideration.
Right. There's another one that I circulated to folks, which did a little bit of editing and threw on a couple of suggestions for the numbers. What you have is 8 and 9. So, Cameron, are you able to pull that up?
Yes, let me do that right now. It's lagging. Hold on.
There you go. Okay, so what has happened here is I pretty much took what was in the staff report and did a little editing on numbers 1 through 6 to make it, at least from my perspective, a little bit easier to understand. Hopefully I didn't leave anything out. I'm sure, Ms. Nestor, if I did, you can advise us there to add anything back in that I might have changed that was a key point. One quick thing, I didn't see a page 3-7 in there, and I'm just wondering, is that not in this year's plan, or maybe you consolidated everything in 3.1 through 3.6?
Let me double check that to make sure our page numbering didn't go off. And thank you, Cameron, for enlarging that for me, because I haven't seen this before, so that's helpful. And I'll check on the 3-7 page for you. And the only thing I would note as you go through these details, I would ask for your consideration for the 3 modification ones that I added probably after you started your draft here.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was going to be the next thing I was going to say is we can see if there's any discussion on those 3 points, but my guess is we would just kind of add them right in. So I don't know, Cindy, I can read these real quick if that would help to just make sure that we haven't missed anything you think is key on the kind of the boilerplate, the background things. The CIP is consistent with the adopted comprehensive small area and master plans. Oh, and I think we lost some of it. There we go. I think that one is fairly much the same. Quite a bit the same as in the staff report. Number 2, the CIP provides both investment in new and reinvestment in existing facilities. 3, the CIP aims to balance investment needs with funding resource opportunities while also considering limited staff resources. Number 4, the CIP complies with adopted financial policies. 5, the CIP attempts to minimize debt and pay-as-you-go funding. And 6, the CIP maximizes use of grant funding, especially for transportation projects. Are there any changes there that anyone would recommend?
I don't have a new item, but for number 2, maybe we want to say new and reinvestment in existing facilities, just and infrastructure. I don't know if that matters, but we add that.
Facilities and infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing is the one about the CIP attempts to minimize debt and pay-as-you-go funding. I don't know, just sometimes I don't know the word, but minimize debt. I mean, cities have to go in debt. I mean, it's sort of like if we want to invest in things, we go into debt. So we shouldn't always be constantly trying to think about minimizing debt, but it's sort of like only taking on debt when it's really fortuitous. It's like we want like not sustainable debt, but we want debt that is strategic. So I just don't know about that one, because I think if I just read that, I would say, oh, well, we should never float bonds because we're always trying to minimize our debt. But we strategically do debt-based investing to have infrastructure that we need paid now and then, or build it now and we pay over time. So I don't know. There's something about the minimizing debt I'm not a real big fan of, but I don't know what other commissioners feel about that item.
Ms. Nestor, did you have any comments there? I think I tried to pull that from the staff report, but I may not have quite got your meaning there.
Yeah, that's certainly the way we've worded it. The intent being that it minimizes the financial burden on taxpayers by leveraging others. But it is written in a more sort of negative tone, and obviously there's times when you need debt, like $120 million high school. So the commissioner's point's well taken. It could be switched to, like leveraging grants and utilizing, debt and pay-go where necessary. There are times where I'll be honest that having pay-go is really nice from a staff perspective, because that pay-goes local tax dollars and it doesn't come with all the complexities of federal and state money. So, and there's things that we do that you can't issue debt. So that's sort of to your point about the debt. So some of our facility reinvestment, you really don't want to do debt on HVAC units or carpets or sort of those smaller life cycle items. But yeah, like a roof and a full building, yeah, then you can do a debt. Maybe switch it to a more positive.
Yeah, well, since 6, it talks about the key thing, which is, maximize use of grant funding. I mean, we could just delete 5. Would that cause a problem in what we recommend to council, or have them misinterpret anything from us?
I don't think so. I think in the past that was more of a specific planning commission discussion several years ago, so it stayed in there. I can tell you the city manager's budget is going to be proposing, how to leverage other resources besides issuing debt so that we can have financial policies that are stable. And so the financial policy piece will also catch the debt point.
Okay. Commissioner Hyra, would you be okay with just deleting 5?
Yeah, I like the idea of deleting 5, because you're right. 0.6 sort of, or now the new 0.5 kind of makes the point that with the CIP, it's, and we just saw what it was, 67% of the projects are funded by funds that are coming from outside the city through grants. So I think that makes a lot of sense, leaving or the revisions and having it be 1 through 5 like it is now.
Okay. Commissioner Coma.
Sorry, I don't want to belabor it. I was just going to suggest combining 5 and 6, which doesn't exist anymore. So I wondered if you could just say that we use debt and pay-as-you-go funding prudently, or something like that. Maybe that would get the meaning across that we do it when we need to, and it is an important resource that we have, but we want to use these other free sources of money first. I don't exactly know what the wording there would be, but that was my suggestion. If you wanted to keep those 2 things in there, you could combine those 2 into 1 and add that kind of at the end.
I'm open to suggestion. I guess what you're suggesting is like a number 5, just, keep 6 the way that is, but then rather than end it after projects, and add some words that would say, and efficiently use debt and pay as you go.
I think the word may have been prudently, but that may convey the thought I heard more than
Yeah.
efficient.
How about, I mean, I like strategic, and strategically use debt,
Sure.
but I don't. Prudently, again, it means like don't do it, and it's like, well, we do need. So I think strategic is a better word, but whatever. It's all
think
capturing the spirit of
Splitting
what
hairs.
we.
No, that sounds good to me, Derek.
Okay.
And that
Okay.
follows nicely after the financial policies because there's a logical connection there. But to those that don't know what the financial policies are, you're calling out the funding sources a little more specifically.
Yep.
You might make the word use should be plural, I think.
Yeah.
Strategically uses.
Right.
Thanks.
Excellent. Okay.
And
All
Mr. Stevens, I just finished reviewing. You can delete 3-7. That was a carryover from last year. I didn't reprint the interactive map into those pages this year. It was just in the slide deck, so it does end at 6.
Okay, Cameron, you can delete that. Very good. Okay. Are there any other, what I'm going to call boilerplate sentences that we either need to or should include in our recommendation to council before we go on to the next section? Okay, if anybody thinks of anything, we can come back to that. Did we want to go ahead and add those 3 modifications that were discussed at the beginning on additional funding?
And Cameron, those were in the staff report, the ones I added in gray, if they elect to put them in.
Okay, let me grab those.
And meanwhile, we can look at that next section, which the thought here was that, this is an odd year protocol, so adding a lot of things is not feasible for this year, but probably there are many things, given the discussions that we've had on Planning Commission, that we would like to see in a CIP. And so I think this is an opportunity for us to identify those thoughts for purposes of developing future CIPs. I put down a few, but I'm not wedded to this language. And if people have edits or additions, this is our document. So the floor is open to that. Commissioner Coma?
I thought this was a great list. I don't have any additions. And I think the wording is great. So no edits from me.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there any proposed edits from any of the other commissioners? Looks like, let's start with Commissioner Weiss.
Thank you. Yeah, I think this is a great list. So thank you for getting this started. I guess I would just add something in the last bullet, maybe a clause at the end that's, so a comma after the word storms, and then just add the phrase along with or to be supported by a holistic plan or or a strategic plan is probably the better word. Yeah.
That addresses green infrastructure?
Yeah, I mean, or to be supported by a strategic plan, or actually better yet, to be supported by a climate resilience plan.
So you'll have to come up with a better acronym than CC-MEEP, right? We got that one already on mitigation. Okay, Ms. Nestor.
Just one minor point on the fourth bullet where it says such as telephone poles. I recommend you switch that to utility poles because that will then get you your power and all the communications line.
Good catch, indeed.
They used to be telephone poles and now they're, and I will note it's also very frustrating because we get underground Dominion lines and then the communication poles lines still stay on the poles and we can't take them down. So that there's a utility piece that we need to coordinate. So if you do the broader terms, that helps me at the staff level.
Talk about a catch-22, right?
Yeah, I really hate having poles just so the Verizon or the Cox line can stay up there.
Indeed.
Just a little shorter.
Okay, so we've got the additional modifications from Ms. Mester earlier. We've got the boilerplate and we've got our items that we would like to see in future CIPs. Are we at a point where somebody would like to make a motion?
Can I make a tiny edit to my edit? Sorry.
Especially if you make the motion.
And then I'm happy to I'll edit it first, then I'll make the motion. Can we just delete to be supported and replace it with guided? Thank you. That feels better.
Everybody okay with that? Okay, floor is yours.
Okay, I'll make the motion. I move that the Planning Commission recommend that the City Council approve pursuant to Section 6.19 of the City Charter and Section 17.08 of the City Code, the FY 2023 to 2028 Capital Improvements Plan, CIP, as presented on
316.
3/16/2022. Can we bring
Yeah, I
that
think
back,
on my
Cameron?
motion, I said as revised on 316. So as, yeah, so if you shift it today, that works. While we wait for the document to come back up.
Sorry about that.
I'm confused.
I'm
Oh.
sorry. Never mind. I thought that there's language that was a little different at the very beginning of that the Mr. Stevens draft didn't have. Apologize. All right. Continue. Sorry.
This is the entirety of the motion, right, Mr.
Yeah.
Stevens? Yeah.
It is.
Okay.
It is.
Did you add yeah, those other things are added. Yes, I'm sorry,
Okay.
go ahead.
Okay. To be continued, that as presented on March 16th, 2022, as summarized on CIP notebook pages 3-1, 3-2, 3-3, 3-4, 3-5, and 3-6, based on the following justifications. 1, the CIP is consistent with the adopted comprehensive small area and master plans. 2, the CIP provides both investment in new and reinvestment in existing facilities and infrastructure. 3, the CIP aims to balance investment needs with funding resource opportunities while also considering limited staff resources. 4, the CIP complies with adopted financial policies. 5, the CIP maximizes use of grant funding, especially for transportation projects, and strategically uses debt and pay-as-you-go funding. 6, the CIP includes $400,000 of federal stormwater funding for Lincoln Project under FY 2023 stormwater flooding mitigation on page 10-9. 7, we will move the capital area food bank construction contribution on page 6-5 from CIP to operating budget remaining as $175K with ARPA funding source. It's not really a justification, but anyway, I guess. And 8, increase general government facility reinvestment, page 6-1 by $400K total to fund the property yard vehicle lift vehicle lift equipment and bay doors, $300K, as well as to conduct a facility need assessment, $100K. The Planning Commission recommends future CIPs include programming and funding for the preservation of existing and expansion of new affordable housing, consistent with the adopted comprehensive plan vision and housing chapters, procurement and installation of new renewable energy facilities, consistent with Chapter 5 of the comprehensive plan, protected bike lanes, consistent with mobility for all modes, expansion of efforts to remove obstacles in sidewalks, such as utility poles, etc., green infrastructure to control flooding from increasingly intense storms, guided by a climate resilience plan.
Very good. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
May we have the roll call, please?
Vice Chair Stevens,
Yes.
Ms. Weiss,
Yes.
Ms. Comont,
Yes.
Ms. Teets,
Yes.
Mr. Fuentes,
Yes.
Mr. Hyra,
Yes.
and Mr. Krasner.
Okay, well, thank you, commissioners. Also, I want to thank staff for joining in this evening and your contributions. And also, I want to give thanks to Krista Michael for joining us on the school side. We appreciate your interest and always look with keen interest on things that are occurring in the school capital budget as well. Okay, with that, I think we can move on to the next item, which is the Planning Commission letter of support of the CACT. If Mr. Garrett, if you'd like to put that on the screen for us. While he's doing that, recall that we addressed this briefly at our last meeting where we had suggested that indication of support from the Planning Commission to the joint CACT ESC letter would be something that we would want to do. So Commissioner Comont drafted a letter, which you see now. And so the question is this something that we would like to go ahead and send to council, or are there any changes, edits to this letter?
I think the letter looks good. I don't have any changes.
Okay, Commissioner Weiss?
Yeah, I think it's a great letter. I guess my only suggestion is to call attention to the action items in the letter, and I would suggest that we do that by adding the phrase after the attached letter. Just add the phrase and its action items, and the recommended action items, assuming we all are on board with the recommended action items in that letter.
You're referring to the individual action items in the CACT?
Yeah, I think it's a powerful letter because it does provide some very specific action items.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if we wanted to give our complete support for those, given that we have not kind of gone through lots of discussion or any discussion on those individual items. I mean, it may be that some commissioners would have other things that they would do on any specific individual item, whereas on the whole, I think my sense is that we're pretty much in agreement with the direction of the letter. So that's a thought, but I'm open to other comments from the commissioners. Okay. What are your thoughts?
That's a fair point. I mean, I think that's a fair point. So I wouldn't object to leaving the letter exactly as it is. I think it's fine.
Okay. All right. Would someone like to make a motion to adopt this letter?
Should I do it? I'll move that we adopt the letter stating the support of the Planning Commission for the letter from the Citizens Advisory Committee on Transportation titled Why Falls Church Should Prioritize Bike Lanes and Micro Mobility Infrastructure.
Second.
Okay, may we have a roll call, please?
Vice Chair Stevens,
Yes.
Ms. Weiss,
Yes.
Ms. Comont,
Yes.
Ms. Teets,
Yes.
Mr. Puentes,
Yes.
Mr. Hyra,
Yes.
Mr. Krasner.
Okay, the letter is adopted. Thank you very much, Commissioner Comont, for drafting that. Part of the thinking of doing this letter now is that you'll see in one of the later items the notice on the bike infrastructure panel discussion that is tomorrow evening. So the thought was to try to get this, get our expression of support to City Council in advance of that event. So with that, we can turn to the next item on the agenda, which is any reports that commissioners might have, planning commissioners' reports. Does anyone have a report from a board and commission meeting they've attended or anything else that they might want to contribute?
And normally I would report on the CACT meeting, but as you said, we did not. They're having a joint meeting with ESC for bikes tomorrow, so we didn't have the meeting last week. So I would just say that I urge everyone to try to attend that meeting tomorrow night if they can.
Yes, I fully endorse that comment. I'll just add briefly that I attended the city's EDC meeting. I think it was the 3rd, I believe, of March. And these are excellent meetings to get up to speed on all of the various development and economic activity in the city. They went into a lot of depth on the situation regarding the movie theater at Founders Row 1 and the request on the part of the developer for additional help to make that work and become a reality, particularly as an IMAX format, which is what is under consideration at the moment. There's a lot of information shared on new restaurant openings throughout the city, in addition to Founders Row 1. So I encourage you, even if you can't attend those meetings live, to go back and check out the recordings if you want to see what's going on in the city. It covers it in a lot of depth. Okay, let us move on to Mr. Fuller. Or do you have a director's report for us this evening?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I'm covering for Paul Stoddard tonight. The only item I really have is just to talk about your next meeting on April 6th, and we have 2 items on there coming up, action items. One is 1001 Lincoln Avenue, that subdivision that you continued previously to this date, April 6th. At this point, staff is still working with the applicant on some of the engineering and water-related issues. And so we're waiting for a resubmission and additional materials to complete that case. And so we anticipate continuing that. So Cameron will note that in the upcoming agenda that expected to be continued to a date certain, and we'll determine that on the 6th. So that will not be an action item on the 6th. Then we would have a work session as our second item on the east end small area plan, and that was also deferred from February 16th. And so that's what's coming up. And then I'll note that we had several correspondence, a flyer on the safe bike infrastructure, and also additional flyer, and then some comments on the One City Center project, and as well as Founders 1 and 2 by Mr. Wynn. So anyway, look those items over. That's the extent of my report for tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Just to add for everybody listening that the link to tune in to the bicycle meeting tomorrow evening and should be on the city's website. So that the time of that meeting is 7:30. And the workshop on the 26th on Tough Talks is on the subject of race and equity. So it sounds very intriguing to me, very interesting, and I'm glad they're holding that. I hope we get a good turnout at that event. Okay, very good. Are there any final words of wisdom from our commissioners? I just want to express thanks to all of you for helping me get through this. I had no idea how this was going to work out this evening, so I appreciate Mr. Krasner's role all that much more. So I'll open it up to any final comments. Councilmember Duncan, by all means.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I don't want to keep you all long because you had a tough meeting. I appreciate your remarks thanking the staff, Tim, about their work. I want to thank you all because, you know, the CIP comes to us bundled with the budget, and council is always somewhat frustrated that even though Cindy tries to bring us up to speed and keep us up to speed through the year, there's just a lot, and I'm glad that you all are digging deep into it and giving your estimable passions and talents to it, because it's helpful for me to hear, you know, the arguments that you're making. So thanks for the effort that you expend on that. Yeah, at the EDA retreat, actually, in the category of bonding to your passions and making strategic investments through debt. When we were talking about affordable housing, I floated the idea that why don't we bond for affordable housing? I mean, we bond for schools and highways and everything else under the sun. If we put our money where our mouth is on long-term commitment to affordable housing, then we should think about that. So I know it's not the year in the CIP cycle to come up with brilliant new ideas necessarily, but as you prepare for next year's, I'd love to see a community discussion devoted to that, and some actual cash allocated into it, I think. At any rate, that's just a thought. Win Singleton's communication that was mentioned there by Gary at the end is really a fascinating. You should read it, and you should know that both Letty and I have talked with him. I've exchanged notes with him. I've tried to meet with him, but he was busy last weekend, so I couldn't. Anyway, we're engaged at a pretty detailed level with him. His perspective is, sort of old school Falls Church, I would say. He's been around here longer than I have, and it's interesting. And anyway, I just want you all to know that when you get communications like that, somebody has typically tried to reach out to people. But if you ever hear that somebody, writes us and hasn't gotten a response, please let me know, because I'd love to make sure that, that doesn't fall through the cracks. Just one other thought, I guess, listening to all the, the projects that you all are involved in that are on the fringes of the city, it reminds us, whether it's, Arlington with the firehouse and Seven Corners, or Fairfax with Great Falls and West Street, or the West Falls project, South Washington Street, Fairfax again. So much of what you all do overlaps with our neighboring jurisdictions, and we don't really have Cindy does everything under the sun, including be our legislative liaison to Richmond, which is how we started the morning with her, and she obviously, covers every other issue that you all care about. But we don't really have anybody dedicated to be our regional, liaison, somebody who spends time meeting with our neighboring county supervisors and county board members and their staff, so forth. So if anybody has any bright ideas about how we could beef up that function, I mean, some of you all of you all probably have contacts in neighboring jurisdictions, and I'd love to leave a legacy of having this. I've talked to the manager a little bit about this and told him he really needs a Secretary of State or somebody who functions in that capacity, and just makes it part of their work week to check in with Dahlia or John Faust or Penny Gross or Katie Crystal and deal with some of these issues that, as Tim said, is, our quality of life here is affected by what they do just across the border from us. So I welcome any thoughts or ideas you might have about that. Finally, the one question I think that we're going to get asked time and time again is what's going on with the Stratford? I mean, if there's one thing that really seems to have gotten people's attention, it's the fencing that was put up through no initiative of the city. We didn't require them to do it. And, the short answer is they're asking so much money for that property that it's probably going to take a while to move. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe somebody will come with a big wad of cash and do something. But again, if you all have any contacts, thoughts, know anybody in town who's in the real estate business, has any bright ideas about how to, repurpose that site, I don't think it's I personally, just speaking for myself, don't think it's a good location for a 9 or 10-story building. I'd love to see it combined somehow with Christian Science Reading Room, which is a worthy function, but probably not the best use of space right there. So anyway, people are going to ask you all about it. You're the Planning Commission. What do you plan to do there? They certainly ask council about it, and we're working it, but we welcome any ideas that people might have, and we're aware that it is going to be a kind of an eyesore in our downtown. While other good things are going on, that may take a little longer to percolate. So anyway, thanks for all the hard work you do. I appreciate it for letting me say a word or two at the end.
Sure. As Commissioner Leon said, development is hard.
Yes, that was a great quote. Indeed. Yeah, I probably love her perspective.
Yeah.
Oh, that's excellent. One more thing. Sorry. This is something Letty and I talk about a lot, and Caroline too, is the T-zones issue. We're trying to find a way to encourage smaller scale infill development, so every project doesn't have to be 2, 3, 4 honking acres with some massive building, and unfortunately our zoning doesn't really help us, develop those 3/4, 1 acre plots with, 40 to 50 unit condominium building type development. And I have a little bit of hard time because of staffing issues, getting attention to that. If you're talking to anybody on city council, outside of the Caroline Letty, Phil crew, and if you happen to think that this is a good idea, encourage them to, get behind that. We've been trying to bring it up to the EDC. Tim's heard us talking about it a lot, but we're having a hard time sort of getting it out of the EDC before full council. So, we're just looking for staff to give us some language to discuss. As Caroline said this morning, we can't decide what we think about it until we start talking about it. So we are trying to talk about it, and would welcome any thoughts or support that you all have for that idea. Okay, thanks. Sorry.
Great. Thank you very much. And you're always welcome to join us, and we appreciate your comments. So I think we'll look towards adjournment here. But before I do that, I just wanted to make sure that we thank Cindy for her great work on pulling together, as she always does, a very in-depth CIP, and not only that, but she helps hold our hand to guide us in the right direction here as Planning Commission. So thank you very much for that. And with that, unless there's anything else, I will consider this meeting at an end. Thank you all. Have a good St. Patrick's Day tomorrow.
All right, thank you. See you at the St. Patty's party at the bike webinar, right?
Thank you all. Really appreciate it.
So long.